A firestorm is unlike any disaster you'll ever face. It impacts your total senses. Bright flames, blinding ash, suffocating smoke, scorching heat, fierce winds, and a sound so loud it vibrates your body to the core. It requires every ounce of resolve to avoid panic and stay in control. The key to survival is to maintain awareness of your surrounding situation and react promptly and correctly to avoid becoming trapped.
Top of the ridge, we gotta go!
To do this, you need a basic understanding of fire behavior, an understanding of the primary elements that influence the direction, speed, and intensity of a wildfire. We aren't trying to make you an expert in predicting fire behavior, just providing the basic knowledge that will help you recognize major warning signs and enable you to make timely decisions that can save your life. The three basic elements that directly influence the behavior of a wildfire are weather, the direction and speed of the wind, the amount of humidity or moisture in the air; vegetation, the type of fuel that feeds the fire, and the density and dryness of that fuel; and topography, the slope and shape of the terrain that is in the fire's path. The purpose of this chapter is to provide you with a basic understanding of how each of these three elements affects the behavior of a fire. In any situation, you can take a look at the conditions around you and assess the direction and speed the fire may take. That way, you can recognize threats early and take appropriate action to avoid them. The key determinant of fire behavior is weather, especially wind. It causes changes in speed and direction of a fire that can become quickly life-threatening. Before you deploy to your evacuation area, you should obtain current and near-term weather reports from the Incident Command Post. This knowledge can be updated via radio reports and through contact with local residents who know the wind's pattern during different parts of the day. It's important to regularly reassess weather conditions in your immediate area because your microclimate weather may differ from the overall forecast. Here are some basic characteristics of wind behavior to keep in mind. Wind direction and speed in canyons, up slopes, and through valleys is more intense and erratic than winds along peaks and ridges. The speed and direction varies greatly between high and low areas. The best indicators are dust, smoke, and flags. Also, watch the smoke column for an indication of wind direction above the surface. That influence can quickly reach the ground, causing sudden changes in the fire's speed and direction. Wind that is deep in a drainage ditch is strongly channeled up and down canyons. This results in rapid acceleration of fire intensity and speed through these areas. Wind often accelerates as it passes over long ridges and through saddles. And turbulence can cause gusty, erratic winds along canyon sides, on the lee side of ridges, and downwind of trees and buildings. Whirlwinds are a strong, circular updraft, much like a tornado. They're generated by fire or solar ground heating. They often form when wind flows around trees and buildings and on the downwind side of major ridges. The rotation of a whirlwind intensifies as air moves towards the updraft. The direction is completely erratic and unpredictable, so stay as far away from them as possible. The impact of humidity on fire behavior is more universal because the total fire area tends to share the same condition. High humidity and lower temperatures are associated with low pressure areas and winds blowing out of the southwest or southeast. This is good because it means lower fire danger and assists in the firefighting effort. Conversely, low humidity and higher temperatures are associated with high pressure areas and winds out of the northwest or northeast. So when the barometer starts rising, so does the fire danger. Vegetation or fuel type is the second element that influences wildfire behavior. Different types of vegetation burn faster, hotter, and produce higher flames than others. And of course, dry vegetation burns faster and hotter than green vegetation. Having a general understanding of vegetation will enable you to look at the type of fuel between you and the approaching fire and get an idea of how fast it might burn. This can help you judge your timing and escape route. The most common types of vegetation for wildfires are brush, grass and weeds, small shrubs, chaparral, small trees with low foliage; timber, which are larger and taller trees; litter, it's the loose layer of dead twigs, needles, and branches on the ground; duff, which is the layer of decaying material between the litter and the dirt; and slash, made up of heavy dead logs and branches lying on the ground. The type of vegetation will influence fire behavior in different ways. The location and density of the vegetation will also change fire behavior. The fuel that carries most fires is brush, grass, shrubs, chaparral, and small trees. This type of vegetation can sometimes be deceiving. For example, this large open grassy field might look like a perfect place to take refuge. It is not. Actually, it's one of the worst places you could choose. In a wide open grassy field, where the fuel path is continuous, fires spread faster, farther, with greater intensity. Fire will consume nearly 100% of all grassy fuel. Another thing to keep in mind is flame length. While trampled grass may produce low flames, do not underestimate the danger of getting burned. Remember that lethal heat is still generated above the flame itself. To experience this yourself, simply light a match, begin moving the palm of your hand slowly down toward the flame. You'll find the point at which it becomes too hot to tolerate is significantly above the tip of the flame. So be very cautious of areas with trampled fuel. Timber and tree foliage, which tend to be located well above ground level, will become involved under severe fire conditions. Timber and tree foliage create the highest intensity flames, but you usually have plenty of time to get out of these areas before the fire ignites them. In contrast, duff and slash, the fuel on the ground, results in smoldering hot spots that linger after the fire passes. Watch out for these if you're walking through a recently burned area. The third element that influences fire behavior is topography, or the slope and shape of the terrain that is in the fire's path. The best way to evaluate how surrounding terrain will affect the path and speed of a fire is to do this. Look at the topography surrounding your location. Imagine a torrential rain. Take a look at where the water would flow. Take particular note of the channels, the chutes, the saddles, the ditches, the depressions where water would converge. Now, reverse that in terms of fire. These are the same paths that fire will follow as it spreads across and up the terrain. So avoid areas where water would flow during a rain, because these are the same areas where fire and heat will be channeled. With that in mind, here are some of the ways in which topography influences fire behavior. Always keep in mind that fire spreads faster going up steep slopes. The steeper the slope, the greater the speed. Vegetation on slopes facing south and southwest tend to be driest due to constant sun exposure. These slopes are the most flammable and are dangerous places to be as fire approaches. Conversely, vegetation on north and northeastern slopes tend to be moist and less flammable. Finally, there are 3 additional important points to keep in mind regarding fire behavior on slopes. First, when a fire reaches a ridge top and begins burning down the other side, it usually decreases in speed, area of spread, and intensity. Second, when a fire crosses the drainage and begins up the next slope, speed, spread, and intensity suddenly increase. And third, where 2 steep slopes face each other, forming a narrow drainage at their base, radiant heat from the burning side can preheat the fuel on the other, resulting in faster, more intense combustion. In addition, hot embers are more likely to cross to the other slope in the winds created by the fire. That creates significant risk for fast burning ignition. For this reason, slopes and drainage areas should be avoided. These are the basic ways in which weather, vegetation, and topography influence fire behavior. Keeping these facts in mind will help you maintain situational awareness and better anticipate when a dangerous condition is forming. Doing this should provide you with valuable lead time to recognize the approaching danger, make your decision to escape, and avoid becoming trapped by the fire. This concludes Chapter 5. Please proceed to Chapter 6 for important tips on how to avoid becoming trapped by a wildfire.